He laughed and divorced her, saying, "No one will ever love you." 10 years later, she returned with husband and twin sons to shatter his life. Hi, my most precious, beautiful family. Before anything, let's take a moment to pray together. Dear God, thank you for this beautiful YouTube family. Please heal me fully and bless every soul watching. Surround us with love, peace, and protection. Amen. This is your Mr. Peter. I'm still in New York receiving treatment, but your love is my greatest strength. I feel every prayer and every word you've sent my way. I miss you with all my heart. My sweet family, please be careful. If you see my videos on any other channel, they are stolen. People are editing my old content and pretending to be me. Please report those channels and unsubscribe. This is our true home. To my new, beautiful family members, welcome with open arms. You are now part of something special. Introduce yourself in the comments. I want to know your name, your story, your heart. And please, don't leave the story in the middle. If the intro feels long, you can skip it, but don't skip the message. Your one like and comment can truly protect this channel. While I rest and recover, James will take care of you with love. Now let's begin today's story with all my heart, just for you.
You're barren, worthless, and no one will ever love you. Carrie Farr's world exploded into a million pieces with those 10 words, each one a bullet fired point-blank into her heart by the man who had once promised to love her forever. But it was the laughter that destroyed her. Derek Carver stood in their Georgetown mansion's marble foyer, surrounded by the shattered remains of her grandmother's Waterford crystal, the only inheritance she'd ever received, the only connection to a family that had loved her unconditionally, and he was laughing. Not the warm laughter she remembered from their early days, but something cold and calculated, the sound a predator makes when cornering wounded prey. "Look at your face," Derek said, his voice carrying the same casual cruelty he'd once reserved for business rivals and incompetent employees. "You actually thought this was going to work out, didn't you? You thought if you just tried hard enough, wanted it badly enough, your broken body might actually do what every other woman manages without thinking about it." Carrie's legs gave out. She sank onto the Persian rug they'd selected together on their honeymoon in Istanbul, when the world had been full of possibilities and their love had felt invincible. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was now kneeling on a rug depicting birds in flight. Freedom she would never have again, at least not in the way she had once imagined it. 3 years of failed pregnancy tests, devastating miscarriages, hormone treatments that made her feel like a stranger in her own body. Doctor's appointments that ended with apologetic shrugs and suggestions for alternative approaches. 3 years of watching Derek's love cool by degrees, of feeling his touch become perfunctory, of hearing him talk to his friends about our situation in the tone reserved for discussing failed investments. "The doctor said we should try the new fertility treatment," Carrie whispered, her voice barely audible above the air conditioning's hum. "Dr. Weatherby thinks my hormone levels might respond better to—" "Stop." Derek's command cut through her words like a blade through silk. At 32, he still possessed the classical good looks that had first attracted her. Sharp jawline, perfectly styled blonde hair, eyes the color of winter sky. But those eyes had grown colder each month their efforts to conceive had failed, and now they held nothing but contempt. "I'm done pretending this is going to work. I'm done wasting money on treatments for a woman who can't perform the most basic function of being a wife." Carrie felt something inside her chest crack, not her heart, which had been slowly breaking for months, but something deeper, her sense of self, her belief in her own worth, the foundation of who she thought she was as a woman. "Derek, please." Carrie struggled to her feet on legs that felt like they might collapse. "We promised each other we'd never give up. We said we'd face everything together. I know this has been hard, but—" "Hard?" His laugh was devoid of warmth, a harsh sound that echoed off the vaulted ceilings they had once planned to fill with children's laughter. Hard doesn't begin to describe what it's like being married to a broken woman who can't give me what every other wife manages without thinking about it. The words hit Carrie like physical blows, each one designed to find the deepest wounds in her already bleeding heart. She had always known Derek could be cruel when things didn't go his way. She'd witnessed his cold dismissal of employees, his calculated destruction of business rivals, but never had his cruelty been aimed at her with such surgical precision. "I met someone," Derek announced, walking to the antique secretary desk they'd bought together at an estate sale in Virginia, where they'd spent a perfect autumn weekend planning their future. He pulled out a manila envelope and turned back to her with something that might have been satisfaction. "Someone who appreciates what I have to offer. Someone who doesn't make me feel like I'm married to a defective piece of machinery." The envelope sailed through the air and landed at Carrie's feet with a soft thud that seemed to echo through the suddenly cavernous room. She didn't need to open it to know what it contained. She could see the lawyer's letterhead through the manila paper, could see enough of the bold black text to understand that her life as she knew it was ending. "Beatrice Whitfield," Derek said, savoring the name like fine wine. 23, beautiful, from an excellent family, and fertile. She's already proven that with her previous boyfriend, though she lost that baby in the first trimester. Still, the point is, she can conceive, which is more than I can say for my current wife. Carrie's vision blurred, but not from tears, from rage. Pure, white-hot rage that she had never allowed herself to feel, that she had swallowed and suppressed and turned inward until it had nearly consumed her. For 3 years she had blamed herself, had wondered if she was failing him, failing their marriage, failing at the most fundamental aspect of being female. But hearing him voice those fears with such vicious clarity made them real in a way that felt like dying. 5 years, she said, not to him but to the universe that seemed determined to strip away everything she held dear. 5 years I gave you everything. I supported your business when you had nothing. I entertained your clients, managed your social calendar, made your house a home. I loved you when you lost your father, held you when you cried, believed in your dreams when no one else would. And I'm grateful for all of that, Derek replied with the same tone he might use to thank a particularly efficient secretary. But gratitude doesn't make you fertile. Gratitude doesn't give me the sons I need to carry on the Carver name. Gratitude doesn't fix what's broken in you. There it was again. Broken. The word that had whispered in her mind during the darkest moments, but hearing it spoken aloud by the man who had once promised to love her forever made it real in a way that felt like a death sentence. "Sign the papers," Derek continued, his voice taking on the business-like efficiency he used in board meetings. "I'm being generous with the settlement. You'll get enough to start over somewhere else. Just not here, and not with my name." Carrie's hands shook as she picked up the envelope, the paper feeling heavier than anything she had ever held. Inside, she knew, would be the legal dissolution of every dream she had ever dared to dream, every hope she had ever allowed herself to nurture, every vision of the future that had sustained her through the darkest moments of their fertility struggles. But as she held those papers, as she looked at the man who had once been her everything, now standing among the shattered pieces of her grandmother's crystal with satisfaction written across his face, Carrie felt something she hadn't expected. Clarity. "You're right," she finally said, her voice steadier than she felt. "No one will ever love me the way you did." Derek's face showed the first flicker of surprise. He had expected tears, begging, perhaps even hysteria. Carrie rose from the rug with a dignity she didn't know she still possessed, clutching the divorce papers to her chest like armor against the devastation threatening to overwhelm her. "Because the way you loved me wasn't love at all," she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "It was ownership, It was conditional. It was cruel. And you know what, Derek? I'm grateful you're showing me your true face now, before I waste any more years trying to earn something you were never capable of giving. Derek's mouth opened and closed without sound, clearly unprepared for this response. "I'll sign your papers," Carrie said quietly, but her voice carried to every corner of the room. "But someday, Derek Carver, you're going to realize what you threw away, and when that day comes, I hope you remember this moment. I hope you remember the sound of crystal breaking and understand that it wasn't just vases you destroyed today. It was the last chance you'll ever have to be loved by someone who saw the best in you, even when you couldn't see it yourself." Without another word, Carrie walked upstairs to pack the remnants of her life, leaving Derek standing alone among the shattered pieces of crystal and dreams, unaware that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life, and handed her the greatest gift she would ever receive: the freedom to discover who she really was when she wasn't trying to be what someone else needed her to be. 10 years later, Carrie would look back on this moment as the day her real life began. Chapter 2: Phoenix Rising from Broken Dreams. The day Carrie Farr looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the strong woman staring back at her, she realized that sometimes you have to completely lose yourself to discover who you were always meant to be. It was March 15th, 2017, exactly 2 years since she'd signed those divorce papers with trembling hands, and Carrie stood in the bathroom of her tiny Georgetown Law Evening Program study room, preparing for the presentation that would either launch her new life or confirm that Derek had been right about her limitations all along. But the woman in the mirror wasn't the same broken creature who had knelt on a Persian rug, believing herself worthless. This woman had fire in her eyes and steel in her spine, earned through 24 months of the most grueling self-reconstruction any human being had ever attempted. "Carrie Farr," she said to her reflection, practicing the confidence she'd learned to wear like armor. International trade specialist, future CEO, woman who refuses to stay down. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It had been built one small victory at a time, one class at a time, one moment of choosing courage over comfort. Like the night 6 months after her divorce when she'd been serving coffee at a political fundraiser and overheard Senator Pembroke discussing trade policies with the Japanese ambassador. Instead of staying invisible as she'd been trained to do, Carrie had quietly approached during a lull in conversation. "Excuse me, Senator Pembroke," she'd said, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. "I couldn't help overhearing your discussion about the tariff implications. Have you considered how the proposed changes might affect small manufacturers in Virginia's textile district?" The senator had looked at her with surprise, then genuine interest as Carrie outlined her analysis, knowledge she'd gained from her economics courses combined with real-world observation from her catering work in factory towns. "That's actually brilliant," Senator Pembroke had said slowly. "Who did you say you were?" "Carrie Farr. I'm a graduate student at Georgetown studying international business." "Well, Ms. Farr, you clearly understand these issues better than most of my advisors. Do you have a card?" Carrie had handed him her hastily printed business cards, cheap paper, basic design, but they represented something revolutionary. Carrie Farr, taking up space in the world again. That conversation had led to her first consulting contract, a small research project for the senator's office that paid more than 3 months of catering work. But more importantly, it had shown Carrie something she'd forgotten. She was brilliant, and the right people would recognize that brilliance if she was brave enough to show it. The real turning point had come during her second year of graduate school, when Professor Blackstone had announced a competition for a summer internship with the World Trade Organization in Geneva. The selected candidate will spend 3 months working directly with international negotiators, he'd explained. "This is a career-making opportunity, so I expect only our most exceptional students to apply." Carrie had stared at the application requirements, perfect grades, faculty recommendations, a presentation to a panel of international experts, and felt the old familiar voice of doubt whispering in her head, "Who are you to think you deserve this? You're a divorced woman living in a studio apartment, working as a server. These opportunities aren't for people like you." But then she'd remembered Derek's laugh, his cruel certainty that she would never amount to anything, and that memory had transformed her doubt into pure determination. Carrie had spent the next month preparing for that presentation like her life depended on it, because it did. She researched trade relationships between emerging markets and developed nations, identified inefficiencies in current negotiation frameworks, and developed a proposal for streamlining international agreements that was so innovative it bordered on revolutionary. The day of her presentation, Carrie had walked into a room full of professors, diplomats, and international trade experts wearing her best dress, a simple navy blue number she'd bought at a consignment shop, and carrying a presentation that represented everything she'd learned about herself over the past 2 years. "Good morning," Carrie had begun, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "My name is Carrie Farr, and I'm here to talk about why the current international trade framework is failing developing nations, and how we can fix it." For the next 20 minutes, Carrie had commanded that room with the authority of someone who had found her calling. She'd fielded questions from former ambassadors, impressed economists with her analysis, and watched as skeptical faces transformed into expressions of genuine admiration. "Ms. Farr," the panel chairman had said when she finished, "that was extraordinary. Where did you develop this expertise?" "In the real world," Carrie had replied honestly. "I've spent the last 2 years working in restaurants that serve diplomats, embassy functions, political fundraisers. I've listened to hundreds of conversations about international policy while serving coffee and clearing plates. Most people don't see servers, which means we hear everything. I combined those observations with academic research to understand how policy actually affects real people." 2 weeks later, Carrie had received the call that changed everything. She'd been selected for the Geneva internship. "Ms. Farr," Professor Blackstone had said when he delivered the news personally, "I've been teaching for 30 years, and that was one of the most impressive presentations I've ever seen. You have a gift for seeing connections that others miss." Carrie had hung up the phone and cried for an hour, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of finally being seen for who she really was. The Geneva experience had been transformative. Working alongside international negotiators, Carrie had discovered that her perspective as someone who had rebuilt herself from nothing gave her unique insights into how to help struggling economies develop sustainable growth strategies. Her supervisor, Dr. Elena Vasquez, had become both mentor and friend. "Carrie," Dr. Vasquez had said during their final week, "you have something special. You understand both the theory and the human impact of policy in a way that's very rare. Have you considered starting your own consulting firm?" "I'm just a graduate student," Carrie had replied automatically. "No," Dr. Vasquez had corrected firmly. "You're a brilliant analyst who happens to still be in school. There's a difference." Now, standing in that bathroom mirror 2 years after the worst day of her life, Carrie was preparing to present her thesis, a comprehensive analysis of trade relationships between the United States and emerging Southeast Asian markets that had already attracted interest from 3 government agencies and 2 Fortune 500 companies. But more than that, she was preparing to step fully into the woman she had become. Carrie Farr, international business consultant, who had built expertise from observation, strength from struggle, and wisdom from pain. Her phone buzzed with a text from her study group. "Good luck today, Carrie. You're going to be amazing." Carrie smiled, thinking about how these brilliant classmates had become her chosen family, how they challenged her intellectually and supported her emotionally in ways she'd never experienced before. Another text, this one from Dr. Vasquez in Geneva. Thinking of you today. Remember, you belong in every room you enter. Carrie looked one more time at her reflection, at the confident posture, the intelligent eyes, the smile that came from genuine happiness rather than the desperate need to please someone else. Derek, she said quietly to the mirror, you were right about one thing. The woman you married couldn't have done this, but she's gone now, and the woman who replaced her is everything you were too small to appreciate. Carrie gathered her presentation materials, straightened her shoulders, and walked out to claim the future she had built with her own hands. One choice at a time, one victory at a time, one moment of courage at a time. Behind her, the timid woman who had once believed herself broken was gone forever. In her place stood Carrie Farr, ready to change the world, and smart enough to know she could do it. The phoenix hadn't just risen from the ashes, she had learned to fly. Chapter 3. When Lightning Strikes Twice. The moment Carrie Farr locked eyes with Patrick Haskell across the Kennedy Center's grand ballroom, she understood why poets had spent centuries trying to describe love at first sight, and why they had all failed miserably. It was April 15th, 2018, exactly 3 years since Derek had destroyed her life, and Carrie had chosen this charity gala for wounded veterans as her gift to herself. Her first night off in 6 months, paid for with the bonus she'd earned from acing her international finance final. She was working the event as part of Magnolia Santos's catering crew, but tonight felt different. Tonight she wore confidence like armor. She moved through Washington's elite circles like water through silk, observing everything while being seen by no one. But tonight felt different, her posture straighter, her smile more mysterious, her dark eyes reflecting the fire that 3 years of rebuilding had kindled into an inferno. She was carrying champagne through the crowd when it happened, that electrical moment when two souls recognize each other across a room full of strangers. Patrick Haskell stood near the silent auction tables, commanding attention without demanding it. And when their eyes met, everything else faded into background noise. Patrick was tall, probably 6'3", with quiet authority rather than loud dominance. His dark hair was perfectly styled but not vain, his custom suit worn comfortably rather than ostentatiously. But his eyes stopped Carrie's breath. Deep brown, intelligent, looking at her like she was the most fascinating person in a room full of senators and Supreme Court justices. His conversation with Senator Archibald Pembroke died mid-sentence as he excused himself and moved through the crowd toward Carrie with focused determination. "Excuse me," he said when he reached her, his voice carrying just a hint of a southern accent that suggested expensive boarding schools and old money. "I'm about to do something completely inappropriate and interrupt your work, but I couldn't let you disappear into this crowd without telling you that you have the most remarkable eyes I've ever seen." Carrie felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack under the warmth of his smile. In 3 years of serving Washington's powerful elite, no one had ever seen her as more than a convenient pair of hands. But this man was looking at her like she mattered, like she was worth stopping a conversation with one of the most powerful senators in the country. "That's quite a line," Carrie replied, her voice steadier than her suddenly racing heart. "Do you use it on all the catering staff, Mr. Haskell, Patrick Haskell? And no, I don't use lines on anyone, actually. I'm famously terrible at small talk." His grin was boyish and completely disarming. "But something about you made me forget every rule I have about appropriate social behavior." Carrie studied his face, looking for the calculation she had learned to recognize in powerful men's expressions. But Patrick's interest seemed genuinely unguarded, his attraction to her as surprising to him as it was to her. "Well, Mr. Haskell, I appreciate the compliment, but I'm working, and my boss doesn't appreciate staff who socialize with the guests." Carrie started to move past him, but Patrick gently touched her arm. Then perhaps when you're not working, I'd love to take you to dinner and apologize properly for interrupting your evening. Carrie paused, studying this man who had just asked out a server at a charity gala filled with socialites, heiresses, and political royalty. Either he was playing some elaborate game she didn't understand, or he was the rarest breed of powerful man, one who saw people rather than positions. "You don't even know my name," she pointed out. "No, but I'd very much like to, along with everything else about you." Patrick's honesty was startling in a city where every conversation was calculated for maximum advantage. "Carrie," she said quietly. "Carrie Farr. Carrie Farr," Patrick repeated, like he was testing how her name felt on his tongue. "That's a beautiful name for a beautiful woman, but I suspect there's something much more interesting than beauty behind those extraordinary eyes." Before Carrie could respond, Magnolia Santos appeared at her elbow like a protective mother hen. "Carrie, darling, Table 7 needs fresh champagne, and the senator's wife is asking specifically for you." "Of course," Carrie said, but as she started to leave, Patrick spoke again. "Carrie Farr, I'm going to be standing right here when you finish working tonight. I don't care if it's midnight. I'll wait." Carrie turned back to study his face, looking for the lie, the manipulation, the agenda that every powerful man in Washington carried like a briefcase. But Patrick's expression held only patient determination and something that looked dangerously like genuine fascination. "That's a long time to wait for someone you just met," Carrie said. "I have a feeling you're worth waiting for," Patrick replied with quiet certainty. As Carrie moved through the crowd serving champagne and canapés, she found herself acutely aware of Patrick's presence across the room. He wasn't watching her. That would have been inappropriate and obvious. But several times when she glanced in his direction, she caught him looking, and each time he smiled like they were sharing a secret. During her brief break, Carrie managed to learn more about Patrick Haskell from the other servers who had worked previous events. He was 35, had built a defense contracting empire from nothing, was worth approximately $50 million, and was famous for his philanthropy and his complete lack of interest in Washington's social climbing scene. "He's never brought a date to any of these events," whispered Constance Beaumont, one of Magnolia's senior servers. "Every socialite in the city has tried to catch his attention, but he treats them all like polite strangers. You must have made quite an impression." Carrie spent the rest of the evening in a state of heightened awareness she hadn't experienced since college. Every time she passed Patrick's table, every glimpse of his profile as he listened politely to whatever political wife was monopolizing his attention, every moment she caught him looking in her direction sent electricity through her nervous system. By 11:30, the crowd had thinned considerably, and Carrie was helping pack up the catering equipment when she realized Patrick was indeed still there, standing near the auction tables exactly where he had promised to wait, checking his watch with the patience of a man who kept his word. "Go," Magnolia said quietly, appearing beside Carrie with a knowing smile. "I've been watching this unfold all evening, and that man hasn't taken his eyes off you for more than 5 minutes at a time. He's either a serial killer or a man in love, and given his reputation, I'm betting on love." "I don't date customers," Carrie said automatically, the wall of self-protection she had built over 3 years rising to shield her from potential disappointment. "Honey," Magnolia said gently, "that man isn't looking at you like a customer. He's looking at you like a man who just found something he didn't know he was looking for. And you're looking at him the same way." Carrie glanced across the ballroom to where Patrick waited, and their eyes met again with that same electric recognition. He didn't move toward her, didn't pressure her, just stood there with infinite patience while she made her choice. "What if this is a mistake?" Carrie whispered. "What if it's not?" Magnolia countered. "What if it's the best thing that ever happened to you?" Carrie took a deep breath, removed her catering apron, and walked across the ballroom toward the man who was about to change her life forever. With each step, she felt the armor of self-protection she had worn for 3 years beginning to crack, revealing the woman underneath who was ready to risk her heart one more time. "Mr. Haskell," she said when she reached him, "I believe you mentioned something about dinner." Patrick's smile could have powered the Kennedy Center's stage lights. "I know a place that serves the best midnight breakfast in Washington, if you trust me enough to let me drive you there." Carrie studied his face one more time, looking for any sign that this was too good to be true. But Patrick's eyes held only warmth, interest, and a vulnerability that suggested he was taking as big a risk as she was. "I trust you," she said quietly, and meant it completely. As Patrick helped her into his car, a understated but elegant Mercedes that spoke of wealth, worn comfortably rather than displayed ostentatiously, Carrie felt like she was stepping into a new chapter of her life. The woman who had been destroyed by Derek Carver's cruelty was about to discover what it felt like to be treasured by a man who saw her true worth. "So, Carrie Farr," Patrick said as they drove through the quiet streets of Washington toward whatever came next, "tell me everything about yourself, and please take your time. I have all night and, frankly, all the time in the world." Chapter 4. The Garden of Second Chances. 3 months after that first midnight breakfast, Patrick Haskell knelt in the rose garden of the Lincoln Memorial at sunrise, holding a ring that cost more than most people's houses. And Carrie Farr finally understood what it meant to be loved by a man who saw her as a gift rather than a burden. The courtship had unfolded like a sophisticated fairy tale, where the princess saved herself, and the prince was smart enough to recognize her worth. Patrick pursued Carrie with patience and intensity, a man who understood that treasures couldn't be rushed, and who had finally found what he hadn't known he was searching for. Their first official date had been dinner at the Hay Adams, where Patrick had reserved the entire rooftop restaurant just so they could talk without interruption. Carrie had arrived in her one good dress, a simple black number she'd bought for job interviews, and found Patrick waiting with a look of such genuine appreciation that she felt beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with clothing or makeup. "You're nervous," Patrick had observed gently as the maitre d' seated them at a table with a perfect view of the White House. "Terrified," Carrie had corrected honestly. "I don't understand what this is or what you want from me." Patrick had leaned forward, his dark eyes serious. "I want to know everything about you. I want to understand what shaped you into the woman who can serve champagne to senators while clearly being smarter than half of them. I want to know what you dream about when you're not working 3 jobs and going to school, and I want you to feel safe enough to tell me." That conversation had lasted until the sun came up, and Carrie had found herself sharing things she had never told anyone. Her childhood as an orphan raised by her grandmother, her dreams of building something meaningful in international business, her work with the children at the hospital, even the devastating end of her marriage to Derek. Patrick had listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions that showed he was truly hearing her, rather than waiting for his turn to talk. When she finished telling him about Derek's cruelty, Patrick had been quiet for a long moment. "That man was an idiot," he had said finally. "And I'm grateful for his stupidity, because it means you're here with me instead of wasting your brilliance on someone too small to appreciate it." The courtship that followed had been a masterclass in how a powerful man could love a woman without diminishing her. Patrick had introduced Carrie to a world of luxury and privilege, but he had done it in a way that felt like sharing rather than rescuing. When he took her to the opera, he asked for her thoughts on the performance. When he brought her to political fundraisers, he introduced her as the most intelligent woman in Washington, and meant it. When she mentioned struggling with an international trade law assignment, he had arranged for her to have coffee with the former Secretary of Commerce, not to give her answers, but to challenge her thinking. You don't need anyone to make you successful, Patrick had told her after watching her hold her own in a debate with 3 Supreme Court justices at a Georgetown law function. You just need someone who's smart enough to stay out of your way and support your dreams. Patrick's estate in Virginia had become their sanctuary, a place where Carrie could study in his library while he worked on his defense contracts, where they could cook dinner together in his enormous kitchen while debating foreign policy, where they could walk through his gardens at sunset, talking about everything and nothing. Carrie had been careful not to let herself fall too quickly, too completely. 3 years of rebuilding herself had taught her the value of independence, and she was determined not to lose herself in another relationship. But Patrick seemed to understand this instinctively, encouraging her ambitions rather than trying to replace them with his world. When Carrie had been offered an internship with the World Bank that would require her to work weekends, Patrick had rearranged his schedule to drive her to the office himself. When she had worried about missing too many catering jobs and losing income, Patrick had quietly arranged for Magnolia Santos to get several high-profile contracts that would provide work for her entire crew. "You're manipulating my life," Carrie had accused him one evening when she realized what he had done. "I'm investing in your dreams," Patrick had corrected gently. "There's a difference." Carrie had been studying in the library of Patrick's estate one evening in June when she overheard him on a phone call with his business partner, Thornton Blackwell. Patrick hadn't known she was in the next room, and the conversation revealed more about his character than any romantic gesture could have. "You're distracted," Thornton had said. "This Carrie woman has you completely off your game." "She has me completely on my game," Patrick had replied firmly. "For the first time in my life, I'm thinking about building something that matters beyond quarterly profits. Carrie makes me want to be the man she sees when she looks at me." "And what man is that?" "Someone worth loving," Patrick had said quietly. "Someone who deserves a woman that extraordinary." Carrie had pressed her hand to her mouth to keep from crying at the vulnerability in his voice. This powerful, confident man who commanded rooms full of generals and senators was afraid he might not be worthy of her love. That night, Carrie had finally allowed herself to acknowledge what her heart had known since that first moment at the Kennedy Center. She was completely, irrevocably in love with Patrick Haskell. Their physical relationship had developed with the same thoughtful intensity as their emotional connection. Patrick had courted Carrie like she was made of precious crystal, never pressuring, never assuming, always asking permission with his eyes before his hands. When they finally made love for the first time in his Virginia estate, with moonlight streaming through his bedroom windows, it had been a revelation. Carrie had never understood that physical intimacy could be both passionate and reverent, both consuming and tender. Patrick loved her body like he loved her mind, with complete attention, genuine appreciation, and infinite patience. He traced her scars from childhood accidents like they were works of art, whispered her name like a prayer, and showed her what it meant to be worshipped rather than simply desired. "I love you," Patrick had told her afterward, holding her against his chest while their hearts slowly returned to normal rhythm. "I love your brilliance, your strength, your kindness, your ambition, your past, your future, and every moment in between. I love you completely, Carrie Farr, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it to you." Carrie had cried then, not from sadness but from the overwhelming relief of being seen, understood, and valued exactly as she was. "I love you too," she had whispered against his skin. "I didn't think I could ever trust anyone with my heart again, but you make me brave enough to try." The proposal had been vintage Patrick, thoughtful, personal, and perfectly timed. He had noticed Carrie's habit of walking through the Lincoln Memorial whenever she needed to think, her fascination with the Rose Garden where she said the beauty helped her solve her most complex problems. "Carrie," Patrick said now, still kneeling among the roses as the Washington Monument caught the first light of dawn. "You've already given me everything I could ever want just by loving me. But I want to give you something in return, a partnership, a family, a love that will never doubt your worth or question your dreams. The ring was spectacular, a flawless 5-carat emerald-cut diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the morning light like captured stars. But it was Patrick's words that took Carrie's breath away. I want to be your husband, your partner in every adventure, the father of your children if you'll have me, and the man who gets to love you for the rest of our lives. I want to build an empire with you, travel the world with you, grow old with you, and spend every day proving that Derek Carver was the biggest fool in history. Will you marry me, Carrie Farr? Carrie looked down at this extraordinary man who had seen past her server's uniform to the woman underneath, who had supported her dreams without trying to control them, who had loved her scarred heart back to wholeness. She thought about the broken woman who had signed divorce papers 3 years ago, believing she was worthless and unlovable. That woman had been wrong about everything. Yes, Carrie said, her voice strong and clear across the rose garden. Yes, Patrick Haskell, I will marry you. I will build that empire with you, have your children, and spend every day grateful that you were patient enough to wait for me to heal. Patrick slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly, then stood to kiss her among the roses as the sun painted Washington in shades of gold and promise. Carrie had never felt more beautiful, more loved, or more certain that her real life was finally beginning. As they walked hand in hand back toward Patrick's car, Carrie caught their reflection in the memorial's polished granite. They looked like what they were, two people who had found their perfect match, ready to face the world together with the confidence that comes from being truly, completely loved. Patrick, Carrie said softly, I need to tell you something. Anything, he replied, bringing her hand to his lips to kiss her new ring. I want Derek Carver to see us together. I want him to see what real love looks like. I want him to understand exactly what he threw away. Patrick smiled, the expression of a man who understood that some victories were worth savoring. My darling Carrie, when we're ready, we'll make sure he sees everything he lost. But for now, let's focus on building something so beautiful, so successful, so obviously blessed that when he finally sees it, the regret will destroy him. Carrie smiled back, feeling the last pieces of her broken heart finally heal completely. Patrick was right. Their love story would be Derek's punishment, and it would be absolutely perfect. Chapter 5. Miracles Written in Starlight. Carrie Haskell stared at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test with tears streaming down her face, finally understanding that sometimes the universe saves its most beautiful gifts for those who have suffered enough to truly appreciate them. She sat on the marble floor of their Tuscany villa's master bathroom, where she and Patrick had been honeymooning for 2 weeks, and the morning sickness that had been plaguing her suddenly made perfect sense. Their wedding 3 months earlier had been everything Carrie had never dared to dream. Patrick wanted to give her a spectacle worthy of a fairy tale, the National Cathedral, 500 guests, an orchestra, flowers from Amsterdam. But Carrie asked for something different, an intimate ceremony with only their closest friends, held in the rose garden where he'd proposed, with Judge Prudence Harrington officiating and children from the hospital as honorary witnesses. I don't need the world to see us get married, Carrie had told Patrick when they were planning the ceremony. I just need you to see me promise to love you forever. The wedding had been perfect in its simplicity. Carrie in a flowing ivory dress that made her look like a goddess, Patrick in a perfectly tailored navy suit that brought out his eyes, and vows they had written themselves that left not a single dry eye among their 50 guests. Carrie, Patrick had said, his voice strong and clear as he looked into her eyes, you taught me that real love isn't about possession or control. It's about partnership, respect, and the daily choice to build something beautiful together. I promise to love your mind as much as your heart, to support your dreams as passionately as my own, and to spend every day proving that you are the most extraordinary woman who ever lived. Carrie's vows had been equally powerful. Patrick, you showed me that my worth isn't determined by what others think I lack, but by what I choose to build with my own hands and heart. You loved me back to wholeness, and I promise to spend our lifetime together, being the woman you see when you look at me with such love. Strong, capable, worthy of every beautiful thing life has to offer. The honeymoon in Tuscany had been a revelation. For 2 weeks, Carrie and Patrick had explored vineyards and art museums, made love in their villa overlooking the Mediterranean, and talked about their dreams for the future while drinking wine older than some countries. Patrick had surprised Carrie by revealing that he had been quietly researching fertility specialists, not because he thought she needed fixing, but because he wanted to support whatever family planning decisions she wanted to make. "I know what that bastard Derek said to you about children," Patrick had told her one evening as they watched the sunset from their terrace. "But I want you to know that my love for you isn't conditional on anything. If we have children, I'll be the luckiest man alive. If we don't, I'll still be the luckiest man alive because I have you." Carrie had cried then, overwhelmed by the difference between a man who loved her despite her perceived flaws and a man who loved her exactly as she was. And now, staring at this pregnancy test, Carrie realized that her body had simply been waiting for the right man, the right love, the right moment to create the miracle she had always been capable of. "Patrick!" she called, her voice shaking with joy and disbelief. Patrick appeared in the bathroom doorway within seconds, his hair still messy from sleep, concern written across his face. "What's wrong? Are you sick again? Should I call Dr. Weatherby?" Carrie held up the pregnancy test with a trembling hand, unable to speak through her tears. Patrick stared at the test for a long moment, then slowly sank to his knees beside her on the marble floor. Are we? "We're pregnant," Carrie whispered, and saying the words aloud made them real in a way that sent pure joy shooting through every cell in her body. Patrick's reaction was everything Carrie could have hoped for and more. He gathered her into his arms and held her like she was made of spun glass, his own tears falling freely as he buried his face in her hair. "I love you," he whispered over and over. "I love you so much, Carrie. Thank you for this miracle. Thank you for giving me everything I never knew I wanted." They held each other on the bathroom floor until the sun was fully up, making plans and sharing dreams and marveling at the perfection of the timing. Carrie had just finished her MBA with highest honors, Patrick's business was more successful than ever, and they were so deeply in love that creating a family felt like the natural next step in their beautiful story. The flight back to Washington was a haze of planning and excitement. Patrick immediately called Dr. Algernon Weatherby, who had become their family physician after meeting Carrie at the hospital, and arranged for an appointment the moment they landed. "Mrs. Haskell," Dr. Weatherby said with a warm smile when they arrived at his Georgetown office, "congratulations. Your blood work confirms what the home test showed. You're definitely pregnant. About 8 weeks along, I'd estimate." Carrie gripped Patrick's hand as Dr. Weatherby conducted the ultrasound, the same procedure that had brought her nothing but heartbreak during her marriage to Derek. But this time, when the doctor's face changed to delighted surprise, Carrie felt only anticipation. "Well, well," Dr. Weatherby murmured, adjusting the ultrasound wand. "This is interesting." "What?" Patrick asked, his voice tight with concern. "Nothing concerning," Dr. Weatherby assured them quickly. "Quite the opposite, actually. Mr. and Mrs. Haskell, you're having twins." The silence in the room was deafening. Carrie stared at the ultrasound screen, where she could clearly see 2 tiny heartbeats flickering like stars in a galaxy of possibility. "Twins," Carrie whispered. "Identical boys, from the looks of it," Dr. Weatherby confirmed. Healthy, strong heartbeats, developing perfectly. You, my dear, are going to have your hands full with two little heartbreakers. Patrick made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and pressed his forehead against Carrie's. Twins, he repeated in wonder. Carrie, we're having twin sons. Carrie couldn't speak through her tears. After years of believing her body was broken, after being told she was worthless because she couldn't conceive, she was pregnant with twins. Two healthy baby boys who would grow up knowing they were wanted, loved, and cherished from the moment they were conceived. The pregnancy progressed like a dream. Carrie experienced morning sickness, but it felt like a gift rather than a burden. Patrick treated her like a queen, making sure she had everything she needed while still respecting her independence and supporting her decision to start her own international consulting firm. Haskell Farr International Consulting, Carrie announced one evening over dinner, presenting Patrick with the business cards she had designed. I want to keep my name professionally, and I want our sons to know that their mother built something meaningful. Patrick had never looked prouder. My brilliant wife, the entrepreneur, I can't wait to watch you conquer the business world. Carrie's consulting firm took off immediately. Her combination of academic excellence, real-world experience serving Washington's elite, and Patrick's connections created a perfect storm of success. Within 6 months, she had landed contracts with 3 embassies, 2 Fortune 500 companies, and the World Bank. As Carrie's belly grew, so did their excitement about becoming parents. Patrick converted his home office into a nursery, painting it a soft sage green and filling it with books, toys, and 2 matching cribs that he had custom-made by a craftsman in Vermont. I want them to know they're loved before they even open their eyes, Patrick told Carrie one evening as they stood in the completed nursery, his hands resting on her 8-month belly. They already know, Carrie replied, covering his hands with hers. They're growing inside love itself. Carrie had never felt more beautiful than she did pregnant with Patrick's children. He photographed her constantly, documenting every stage of her changing body with the reverence of an artist capturing a masterpiece. The pictures would later fill their family albums. Carrie at the Lincoln Memorial with her 6-month belly, Carrie in their Virginia garden surrounded by roses at 7 months, Carrie and Patrick reading business journals together at 8 months. The nursery became their favorite room in the house, where they would sit together in the evenings, Patrick reading business journals aloud to Carrie's belly while she worked on her laptop, building her empire while growing their family. Boys, Patrick would say to Carrie's stomach every night before bed, your mama is the most extraordinary woman in the world. She's going to teach you to be strong, kind, intelligent, and brave. And I'm going to teach you to love her the way she deserves to be loved, completely, unconditionally, and forever. Carrie would fall asleep each night with Patrick's hand on her belly, feeling the twins moving inside her, knowing that she was carrying not just children, but the physical manifestation of the deepest love she had ever known. One evening in early September, as Carrie sat in the nursery working on a proposal for the European Union while Patrick assembled a second changing table, she felt an overwhelming sense of completion. 3.5 years earlier, she had believed herself to be broken, worthless, incapable of giving a man what he needed. Now she was building an international business empire while carrying twin sons, and married to a man who saw her as a miracle. Patrick, she said softly, pausing in her typing. He looked up from the instruction manual, a screwdriver in one hand and a confused expression on his face. I want Derek to know, Carrie said quietly. I want him to know about the twins, about our business success, about how happy we are. I want him to see what real love looks like. Patrick set down the screwdriver and came to kneel beside Carrie's chair, his hands gentle on her belly where his sons were growing. Are you sure? He asked carefully. I don't want anything to upset you or stress the babies. Carrie placed her hands over his, feeling the twins responding to their father's touch with gentle kicks. "I'm sure," she said firmly, "not for revenge, for closure. I want him to see that his cruelty didn't break me. It made me strong enough to recognize real love when it found me." Patrick smiled, the expression of a man who would support his wife in anything she needed to heal completely. "Then we'll make sure he sees," Patrick said quietly. "When you're ready, when the boys are safe in your arms, we'll show Derek Carver exactly what he lost when he was too small to appreciate the extraordinary woman he had." Carrie smiled back, feeling their sons moving beneath their joined hands, knowing that her greatest triumph wasn't going to be showing Derek how successful she had become. It was going to be showing him how deeply, completely, and unconditionally she was loved. The miracle she carried wasn't just two healthy baby boys. It was the proof that real love could heal any wound, that the right man would see her worth, and that sometimes the universe saved its most beautiful gifts for those brave enough to rebuild themselves from ashes. Carrie Haskell was about to become the mother of twins, the owner of a thriving international business, and the wife of a man who worshipped her. But most importantly, she was about to prove that Derek Carver had been wrong about absolutely everything. Chapter 6. Double Blessings, Infinite Joy. At 3:47 a.m. on October 15th, 2019, Carrie Haskell brought two perfect miracles into the world, and Patrick Haskell cried like a man witnessing the birth of everything he'd ever dreamed of. Labor had started during a board meeting for Carrie's consulting firm, which had grown to employ 15 people and was about to sign its largest contract yet with the Department of State. Carrie was presenting quarterly projections when she felt the first contraction, but being Carrie, she finished her presentation and closed the deal before admitting she might be in labor. "Carrie Farr Haskell," Patrick said when she called from the conference room. "Only you would negotiate $1 million contract while going into labor with twins." "It's Haskell Farr International," Carrie corrected with a laugh that turned into a gasp as another contraction hit. "And yes, I think it's time." The drive to Georgetown University Hospital had been surreal. Carrie timing contractions while still fielding calls from clients, Patrick driving carefully while calling Dr. Weatherby and trying not to panic. But from the moment they arrived at the maternity ward, everything felt like destiny unfolding exactly as it should. "Mrs. Haskell," said Dr. Constance Beaumont, the obstetrician Dr. Weatherby had recommended, "you're having very strong, very efficient contractions. These boys are ready to meet their parents." Carrie's labor progressed quickly but not dangerously, her body seeming to know exactly what to do after years of preparing for this moment. Patrick never left her side, holding her hand through contractions, feeding her ice chips, and whispering encouragement that made her feel like the strongest woman who had ever lived. "You're incredible," Patrick told her between contractions, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "Look what you're doing, Carrie. Look what we're creating together." "We're having babies," Carrie whispered in wonder, as if the reality was just hitting her. "Patrick, we're actually having babies." "We're having our sons," Patrick corrected softly. "Two perfect little boys who are going to grow up knowing they were wanted from the moment we dreamed of them." The actual birth was both the most challenging and most transcendent experience of Carrie's life. When Dr. Beaumont told her it was time to push, Carrie drew on every ounce of strength she had built over 4 years of rebuilding herself from nothing. "Here comes baby A," Dr. Beaumont announced, and suddenly there was a sound Carrie had never heard before, the cry of her firstborn son. Patrick sobbed openly as doctor. Beaumont placed their first son on Carrie's chest, this tiny, perfect creature with a full head of dark hair and lungs that announced his arrival to the entire maternity ward. "He's beautiful," Carrie whispered, touching the baby's impossibly soft cheek with one finger. "He's absolutely perfect." "Dolph," Patrick said softly, their chosen name for their firstborn. "Hello, Dolph Haskell. I'm your daddy, and this is your mama, and we love you more than all the stars in the sky." 3 minutes later, their second son made his entrance with equal drama, and Dr. Beaumont placed Edward Haskell on Carrie's chest beside his brother. Carrie looked down at her two sons, identical but already showing distinct personalities. Dolph calm and observant, Edward more vocal about his displeasure with being evicted from his comfortable home, and felt her heart expand to accommodate a love so vast it seemed impossible to contain in one human body. "Patrick," she whispered, tears streaming down her face as she held both babies against her chest. "Look what we made. Look what we did together." Patrick was crying too hard to speak coherently, but he managed to kiss Carrie's forehead and then each of his sons' tiny heads, his large hands gentle as butterfly wings as he touched them for the first time. "They're perfect," he finally managed. "Carrie, they're absolutely perfect." The next few hours passed in a haze of examinations, measurements, and paperwork, but Carrie remembered every detail with crystal clarity. Dolph weighed 7 pounds, 2 ounces, and Edward weighed 6 pounds, 15 ounces. Both boys were healthy, strong, and clearly intelligent. They tracked movement with their eyes and seemed to recognize their parents' voices immediately. "They know us," Carrie marveled as she nursed them for the first time, one in each arm, while Patrick took what seemed like 1,000 pictures. "They actually know our voices." "Of course they do," Patrick said softly. "They've been listening to us read business journals and argue about international trade policy for months. They probably understand foreign exchange rates better than most adults." The private suite Patrick had arranged at Georgetown University Hospital became their family's first home together. Flowers arrived hourly, from Carrie's business partners, from Patrick's colleagues, from the nurses at Children's National Hospital, where Carrie had volunteered for so many years. But it was the visit from Dr. Algernon Weatherby that moved Carrie to tears. "Mrs. Haskell," the elderly doctor said as he examined the twins with obvious delight, "these boys are perfect examples of what love can create. Strong, healthy, clearly adored. You should be very proud." "I can't believe they're really here," Carrie admitted, watching Patrick change Edward's diaper with the concentration of a man defusing a bomb. "For so long I thought this would never happen for me." "The heart has its own timeline," Dr. Weatherby said gently. "These boys waited until they knew they would be born into love, security, and parents who were ready to give them everything they need." Carrie spent those first days in the hospital marveling at the perfection of her sons. Dolph was clearly the contemplative one, studying everything around him with serious dark eyes that already looked remarkably like Patrick's. Edward was more social, making tiny sounds that seemed like attempts at conversation, and clearly preferring to be held face to face so he could study whoever was talking to him. "They have distinct personalities already," Carrie observed on their second day, watching Dolph sleep peacefully while Edward fussed until Patrick picked him up. "Look how different they are." "Just like their parents," Patrick said with a smile, settling Edward against his shoulder where the baby immediately calmed. "One thoughtful strategist, one charming diplomat." The photographer Patrick had hired captured every moment, the twins' first feeding, their first real sleep, Carrie's face as she watched Patrick sing lullabies in his surprisingly good baritone voice, Patrick's expression of pure wonder as he held both boys while Carrie napped. But it was the quiet moments that Carrie treasured most. Late at night, when the hospital was peaceful and the boys were sleeping, she and Patrick would sit together in the dimly lit room, just watching their sons breathe and marveling at the miracle they had created. "I keep thinking about Derek," Carrie admitted on their third night, nursing Dolph while Patrick held Edward. "About what he said to me, about how no one would ever love me." Patrick's jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. And what do you think about that now? Carrie looked around their hospital suite, at the flowers from friends and colleagues, at Patrick, who hadn't left her side since the boys were born, at the two perfect babies who existed because she had found a man capable of real love. I think he was right about one thing, Carrie said softly. No one will ever love me the way he did. Because real love doesn't hurt, real love doesn't diminish, and real love creates beautiful things instead of destroying them. Patrick leaned over to kiss her forehead, careful not to disturb the baby in his arms. Carrie, you are loved by your husband, your sons, your friends, your colleagues, and every child whose life you've touched at the hospital. You are loved completely, unconditionally, and forever. Derek Carver was wrong about everything. On their 4th day in the hospital, Carrie was finally ready to share their joy with the world. She had Patrick take a photograph of her holding both boys, their tiny faces peaceful in sleep, her own face radiant with happiness and love. I want to post this, Carrie said, showing Patrick the picture. I want everyone to see how beautiful our family is. Patrick studied the photograph. Carrie looked like a Madonna, her dark hair falling in soft waves around her face, her skin glowing with new motherhood, and the twins perfect in her arms like they had been made to fit there. It's beautiful, Patrick said softly. You look like you were born to be their mother. I was, Carrie said with quiet certainty. I think everything that happened to me, all the pain, all the struggle, all the years of feeling broken, it was all preparing me to be strong enough to love them the way they deserve. Carrie posted the photograph on social media with a simple caption. Dolph and Edward Haskell, born October 15th, 2019, perfect in every way. Our hearts are complete. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of congratulations from colleagues, friends, and even acquaintances who had watched Carrie's transformation over the past 4 years. But Carrie found herself watching the post for one specific response, one person she hoped would see what real love had created. He'll see it, Patrick said quietly, understanding without her having to explain. And when he does, he'll understand exactly what he lost. Carrie nodded, but she realized with surprise that she no longer cared about Derek's reaction for the reasons she once had. She wasn't trying to prove anything to him anymore. She simply wanted him to see that his prediction had been wrong, that she had been loved, completely, passionately, and beautifully, and that love had created these two perfect miracles. As they prepared to take Dolph and Edward home to the nursery Patrick had spent months perfecting, Carrie felt a sense of completion she had never experienced before. She was no longer the broken woman who had signed divorce papers 5 years ago. She was no longer the struggling student working 3 jobs to rebuild her life. She was Carrie Haskell, successful businesswoman, beloved wife, and now mother to the 2 most perfect babies ever born. Ready to go home, Mrs. Haskell? Patrick asked, carefully buckling Edward into his car seat while Carrie secured Dolph. Ready, Carrie said, but as they walked out of the hospital toward their future as a family of 4, she realized she had been ready for this moment her entire life. She just hadn't known it until she found a man worthy of building it with. The twins slept peacefully in their car seats as Patrick drove them home through the October afternoon, and Carrie watched the Washington landscape pass by with tears of pure joy streaming down her face. Somewhere in this city, Derek Carver was living his life, probably believing he had made the right choice in leaving her for a younger woman. But Carrie knew something he would never understand. The best revenge wasn't destroying someone's life. It was building something so beautiful, so perfect, so obviously blessed that their absence from it became their punishment. And as they pulled into the driveway of their Potomac estate, where a nursery waited to welcome Dolph and Edward Haskell home, Carrie knew that her revenge was complete. Not because she had hurt Derek, but because she had proved him wrong about everything that mattered. Chapter 7. Whispers of the past. 5 years after she'd last spoken his name, Carrie Haskell heard Derek Carver whispered across the champagne reception at the Kennedy Center and felt absolutely nothing, which was exactly how she knew she was, finally, completely free. December 10th, 2024. Carrie was attending the annual International Women in Business Gala, being honored as Washington's Entrepreneur of the Year for building Haskell Farr International into a $50 million consulting empire. She stood near the silent auction tables wearing a stunning midnight blue Valentino gown that Patrick had surprised her with. Her dark hair swept into an elegant chignon, showcasing the diamond earrings he'd given her for their 5th wedding anniversary. At 37, Carrie had never been more beautiful or confident. Success suited her like a perfectly tailored coat. She wore it naturally, comfortably, without the desperate need to prove herself that had driven her in those early years. Her consulting firm now employed over 100 people across 3 continents. She sat on the boards of 5 major charities, and her insights on international trade were regularly quoted in the Wall Street Journal. But more importantly, she was deeply, completely happy. Patrick treated her like a queen every single day. Their twin sons, Dolph and Edward, were healthy, brilliant 5-year-olds who attended the prestigious Sidwell Friends School, and their family life was everything she had once dreamed of, but never believed she deserved. "Carrie, darling," called Rosalind Pemberton, gliding toward her with the expression of someone carrying delicious gossip. Rosalind was the wife of Senator Archibald Pembroke and one of Washington's most well-connected socialites, a woman who knew everything about everyone and wasn't shy about sharing information. "Rosalind," Carrie smiled warmly, genuinely fond of the older woman who had become both a mentor and friend over the past few years. "Thank you for coming tonight. Patrick will be sorry he missed you. He's in Brussels closing a defense contract." "Oh, I'm sure he'll make it up to you," Rosalind said with a knowing smile. "That man worships the ground you walk on. But darling, I have the most interesting news, and you're the first person I thought to tell." Carrie sipped her champagne, only half listening as she watched the crowd of Washington's power elite. She spotted 3 Supreme Court justices, a dozen senators, and at least 5 ambassadors, all potential clients for her firm, all people who now sought her expertise rather than dismissing her as invisible help. "It's about Derek Carver," Rosalind continued, and Carrie's attention snapped back with laser focus. Carrie hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years. She occasionally saw mentions of him in the business section. His real estate development company had struggled through several economic downturns, requiring multiple bailouts and investor rescues, but he had long since ceased to be relevant to her life. "What about him?" Carrie asked, proud that her voice remained steady and disinterested. "He's getting married," Rosalind announced with obvious relish. "To Vivienne Carlisle, Senator Pembroke's youngest daughter, 28 years old, absolutely stunning, fresh out of Harvard Law. The engagement party is next month at the Willard Hotel, you know, where all the political marriages are celebrated." Carrie felt a flicker of something. Not pain, not jealousy, but a kind of distant curiosity, like hearing news about a character from a book she had read long ago. "How interesting," Carrie said calmly. "I'm sure they'll be very happy together." Rosalind studied Carrie's face with the intensity of a scientist examining a particularly fascinating specimen. "You know, darling, I expected more of a reaction. After all, he did put you through that dreadful divorce." Carrie smiled, the serene expression of a woman who had long since processed and moved beyond old wounds. "Rosalind, that was a lifetime ago. I'm not the same person who was married to Derek Carver. I'm actually grateful to him. If he hadn't divorced me, I never would have found Patrick, never would have had my sons, never would have built my company. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that ever happened to you. Still, Rosalind pressed, clearly fishing for drama. It must sting a little to know he's marrying a senator's daughter. All that money and political connection he always wanted. Carrie laughed, a sound of genuine amusement. Rosalind, I married a man worth 10 times what Derek will ever have. I run a company that's more successful than anything he's ever built. And I have 2 sons who will grow up knowing what real love looks like. If anyone should be stinging, it's probably him. But as Carrie said the words, she realized something interesting was happening in her mind. For the first time in 5 years, she was actively thinking about Derek Carver, and not from a place of hurt or anger, but from a position of such complete victory that she almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Later that evening, after accepting her award and giving a speech about female entrepreneurship that earned a standing ovation, Carrie sat in the back of her driver's car and found herself genuinely curious about this engagement. She pulled out her phone and, for the first time in years, Googled Derek Carver. The results were illuminating. His company, Carver Development, had been struggling for years, hemorrhaging money on failed projects and requiring multiple investor bailouts to stay afloat. The most recent articles suggested he was desperately seeking new funding sources to avoid bankruptcy. Vivienne Carlisle's engagement photos showed a beautiful young woman with blonde hair and patrician features standing beside Derek in what was clearly a professionally staged shoot. She looked like the kind of woman Derek had always thought he deserved, young, beautiful, well-connected, and probably completely unaware of what she was getting herself into. Carrie studied Derek's face in the photos with the detached interest of an anthropologist examining artifacts from an ancient civilization. He looked older, harder around the edges, with the kind of desperate ambition that came from years of chasing success and never quite achieving it. His smile in the photos was calculated rather than genuine, the expression of a man who saw marriage as a business transaction rather than a love story. Poor Vivienne, Carrie murmured to herself, genuinely feeling sympathy for the young woman who was about to discover what it meant to be married to a man incapable of real love. When Carrie arrived home to their Potomac estate, she found Patrick in his study, video conferencing with clients in London. He held up one finger to indicate he'd be finished soon, and Carrie blew him a kiss before heading upstairs to check on their sons. Dolph and Edward were sleeping peacefully in their adjoining bedrooms, their 5-year-old faces angelic in the soft glow of their night lights. Carrie stood in each doorway for a moment, marveling at how perfect they were, how clearly they were loved and secure in that love. These boys would never wonder if they were wanted. They would never question their worth based on someone else's inability to appreciate them. They would grow up knowing that real love was patient, kind, supportive, and unconditional because they were witnessing it every day between their parents. "How was the gala?" Patrick asked, appearing behind Carrie as she watched Edward sleep. His arms came around her waist, and he pressed a soft kiss to her neck. "I won," Carrie said simply, leaning back against his chest. "Entrepreneur of the Year. The trophy is in the car." "I'm so proud of you," Patrick murmured against her hair. "But I'm not surprised. You're the most extraordinary woman in Washington, possibly the world." Carrie turned in his arms, studying his face in the dim hallway light. After 6 years of marriage, Patrick still looked at her like she was a miracle he couldn't quite believe he deserved. "Patrick," Carrie said softly, "I learned something interesting tonight. Derek Carver is getting engaged." Patrick's expression didn't change, but his arms tightened slightly around her. "How do you feel about that?" Carrie considered the question seriously. "Curious, mostly, and grateful. Seeing that announcement made me realize how completely I've moved on, how perfectly everything worked out. I don't feel hurt or angry or jealous. I feel sorry for his fiancée, actually. Because she's about to marry a man who doesn't know how to love," Patrick said quietly. "Exactly." Carrie smiled up at her husband. She's 28 years old, Patrick, the same age I was when Derek threw me away like garbage. She has no idea what she's signing up for. Patrick studied Carrie's face carefully. Is there something you need to do about this? Some closure you need? Carrie was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the young woman in those engagement photos, about the cruel words Derek had spoken 5 years ago, about the life she had built from the ashes of that destroyed marriage. I want to go to the engagement party, Carrie said finally. Not for revenge, not to cause drama, but to show myself how far I've come. And maybe to show that young woman what real love looks like, in case she needs to see the difference. Patrick smiled, the expression of a man who would support his wife in whatever she needed to heal completely. Then we'll go, he said simply. All 4 of us. And we'll show Derek Carver and everyone else in that room exactly what he lost when he was too small to appreciate the most extraordinary woman he'll ever meet. Carrie kissed her husband softly, tasting love and support and absolute devotion in his touch. Have I mentioned lately that I'm ridiculously in love with you? Only every day, Patrick replied with a grin, but I never get tired of hearing it. As they walked hand in hand toward their bedroom, Carrie felt a sense of completion settling over her. The circle was about to close, not with vengeance or cruelty, but with the simple, powerful truth of what her life had become. Derek Carver was about to marry another young woman, probably for the same selfish reasons he had married Carrie. But this time there would be witnesses to what real love looked like. This time someone would be there to show the difference between a man who took and a man who gave, between conditional love and the unconditional devotion that built empires. Carrie fell asleep that night in Patrick's arms, their sons safe in their rooms down the hall, her company thriving, her heart completely healed. Tomorrow she would begin planning their appearance at Derek's engagement party, not as the broken woman who had signed divorce papers 5 years ago, but as Carrie Haskell, successful entrepreneur, beloved wife, devoted mother, and living proof that sometimes the best revenge was simply being happy. The past was about to meet the present, and Carrie couldn't wait to see the look on Derek's face when he realized exactly how wrong he had been about everything. Chapter 8. The architect of destiny, Carrie Haskell, stood in front of her walk-in closet at 6 a.m. on a snowy January morning, holding a dress that cost more than most people's cars, and realized she was about to orchestrate the most important presentation of her life, except this time she was the product being presented. January 15th, 2025, exactly 2 weeks before Derek Carver's engagement party at the Willard Hotel. Carrie had spent the past month planning their appearance with the same strategic precision she brought to $1 million consulting contracts. This wasn't about revenge, it was about storytelling, showing the difference between conditional love and unconditional devotion, proving that sometimes the best victory was simply living well. The dress in her hands was a masterpiece, emerald green silk that would make her skin glow, cut in a classic silhouette that was both elegant and subtly commanding. She'd chosen it specifically because green was the color of growth, renewal, and prosperity, everything Derek had told her she would never achieve. Still thinking about the Valentino? Patrick asked from the bedroom doorway, already dressed for work in one of his perfectly tailored suits. Even after 6 years of marriage, Carrie felt her heart skip when she looked at him. This man who chose to love her more deeply every day, who supported her dreams as passionately as his own. It's perfect, Carrie said, hanging the dress carefully back in its protective garment bag. But I keep wondering if I'm overthinking this whole thing. Patrick crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder, as they both looked at the carefully curated wardrobe that reflected Carrie's transformation from struggling student to successful entrepreneur. "Carrie," he said softly, You've built a $50 million company, raised two incredible sons, and created a life so beautiful that people write magazine articles about it. You're not overthinking anything. You're simply ensuring that when you walk into that room, everyone sees exactly who you've become. Carrie leaned back against Patrick's chest, drawing strength from his unwavering confidence in her. What if seeing him brings back all those old feelings? What if I remember how broken I felt when he threw me away? Then you'll look at our sons, remember how much I love you, and realize that being thrown away by Derek Carver was the best thing that ever happened to you, Patrick replied with quiet certainty. Baby, you're not the same woman who signed those divorce papers. You're Carrie Haskell. You're magnificent, successful, loved, and completely unbreakable. That evening, Carrie sat in her home office, reviewing the intelligence she had gathered about Derek's current situation. Her business success had given her access to information that revealed just how dramatically their fortunes had reversed. Carver Development was hemorrhaging money, sustained only by increasingly desperate investor agreements and loan arrangements that would cripple the company if his current projects failed. Derek's engagement to Vivienne Carlisle wasn't just romantic, it was a calculated business move designed to access Senator Pembroke's political connections and potentially secure government contracts that could save his failing empire. Interesting reading? Rosalind Pemberton asked, settling into the chair across from Carrie's desk with 2 glasses of wine. She had become Carrie's unofficial intelligence source, feeding her information about Washington's social dynamics with the enthusiasm of a woman who lived for political intrigue. Fascinating, Carrie replied, closing the file of financial reports and newspaper clippings. Derek's company is basically a house of cards held together by other people's money and his ability to charm investors. This marriage isn't about love, it's about survival. Poor Vivienne, Rosalind sighed dramatically. That girl has no idea she's being used as a business asset. She thinks she's in love with a successful real estate developer. She doesn't realize she's actually engaged to a desperate man who sees her father's Senate connections as his last hope for financial salvation. Carrie felt a genuine pang of sympathy for Vivienne Carlisle. The young woman in the engagement photos looked radiant, clearly believing she was embarking on a fairy tale romance. Carrie remembered that feeling, the absolute certainty that she was loved, the joy of planning a future with someone, the naive trust that had made Derek's betrayal so devastating. She deserves better, Carrie said quietly. She does, Rosalind agreed. But sometimes people have to learn these lessons the hard way. The question is, what are you planning to do about it? Carrie was quiet for a long moment, considering her options. She could simply attend the party, make polite conversation, and leave. She could create a dramatic scene that would give Washington's social circle gossip material for months. Or she could do something far more elegant, show up as living proof that real love existed, that women could rebuild themselves stronger than before, that the right man would see value where the wrong man saw worthlessness. I'm going to tell the truth, Carrie said finally. Not in a cruel way, not to hurt anyone, but simply by being myself. By showing up with Patrick and our sons, by being genuinely happy and successful, by demonstrating what my life became after Derek decided I wasn't worth keeping. That, Rosalind said with obvious approval, is the most devastating revenge possible. You're going to kill him with kindness and success. The next week passed in a blur of final preparations. Carrie had her hair and makeup professionally done by the team that worked with Washington's most prominent women, ensuring she would look absolutely radiant but not overdone. Patrick had his finest tuxedo tailored to perfection, understanding that he would be representing not just himself, but the kind of man who truly cherished his wife. But it was preparing the twins that proved most important to Carrie. Dolph and Edward, now 5 years old, were intelligent, well-mannered children who had inherited Carrie's sharp mind and Patrick's natural charm. They understood that they were attending a special party where they would meet people who had known their mother before they were born. "Mama," Dolph asked one evening as Carrie helped him choose his outfit, a miniature version of Patrick's tuxedo that made him look like a tiny gentleman, "why is this party so important?" Carrie knelt down to meet her son's serious, dark eyes, seeing so much of Patrick in his thoughtful expression. "Because sometimes in life people make mistakes about other people. They think someone isn't valuable when actually that person is very precious. This party is a chance for Mama to show some people that they were wrong about her." "But we already know you're precious," Edward piped up from his position on Carrie's bed, where he was arranging his bow tie with the concentration of a surgeon. "Daddy tells us every day that you're the most wonderful mama in the world." Carrie's heart swelled with love for these two perfect boys who had never known anything but absolute security in their parents' love. "That's right, sweetheart. And when people see our family together, they'll understand what real love looks like." "Are we going to meet the man who was mean to you?" Dolph asked with the direct honesty of a 5-year-old. Carrie chose her words carefully. "We might. But if we do, I want you to remember that his meanness had nothing to do with me and everything to do with him. Some people don't know how to love properly, and that makes them say cruel things. But look what happened. Because he couldn't love me the way I deserved, I found your daddy, who loves me perfectly. And then we had you two, which means his meanness actually led to the most beautiful things in my life." The twins absorbed this wisdom with the seriousness of children who had been raised to think critically about the world around them. "So, we're going to show him what he missed?" Edward asked. "We're going to show everyone what real love looks like," Carrie corrected gently. The night before the engagement party, Carrie stood in front of her bathroom mirror applying the diamond earrings Patrick had given her for their anniversary, stones so brilliant they caught light from across the room. Her reflection showed a woman in her prime, confident, successful, deeply loved, and completely at peace with who she had become. Patrick appeared behind her, already dressed in his tuxedo, looking like he had stepped off the cover of a magazine. "You're breathtaking," he said softly, his hands settling on her shoulders. "We look good together," Carrie observed, studying their reflection, two people who had found their perfect match, who brought out the best in each other, who had built something beautiful from the foundation of genuine love and mutual respect. "We look like what we are," Patrick corrected. "A family, a partnership, living proof that real love exists." Carrie turned in his arms, her emerald dress rustling softly. "Patrick, tomorrow night might be difficult for me. Seeing Derek again, being in the same room where so many of my insecurities were born, I might need extra reminding of who I am now." Patrick cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones with infinite tenderness. "Carrie Haskell, you are the CEO of a $50 million international consulting firm. You are the mother of two brilliant, beautiful sons who worship you. You are the wife of a man who falls more in love with you every single day. You are powerful, successful, generous, kind, and absolutely magnificent. And if you forget any of that tomorrow night, I'll spend every moment reminding you." Carrie kissed her husband softly, tasting love and devotion and absolute security in his touch. "I love you, Patrick Haskell. Whatever happens tomorrow, I love you." "I love you too," Patrick replied. "And tomorrow night everyone in that ballroom is going to see exactly why I'm the luckiest man alive." As Carrie fell asleep that night in Patrick's arms, their sons safe in their rooms down the hall, she felt a sense of calm determination settling over her. Tomorrow night wasn't about revenge or drama or proving anything to Derek Carver. It was about closure, about showing herself how far she had come, about demonstrating to anyone who needed to see it that love, real, unconditional, transformative love, could heal any wound and build any dream. She was ready to face her past as the woman she had become, strong, successful, loved, and completely unashamed of the journey that had brought her to this moment of perfect happiness. The girl who had been destroyed by cruel words was gone. In her place stood Carrie Haskell, and tomorrow night she was going to shine like the diamond she had always been. It had just taken the right man to recognize her brilliance and the right circumstances to let her light illuminate the world. Chapter 9. The Gathering Storm. On the morning of Derek Carver's engagement party, Carrie Haskell woke up in her husband's arms and realized that some storms weren't meant to destroy. They were meant to wash away everything false so that only truth remained standing. February 1st, 2025. A crisp Saturday morning in Washington. But Carrie's sleep had been restless, filled with half-remembered dreams and a knot of anxiety she hadn't expected. Outside their Potomac Estates windows, the world was painted in shades of silver and white, but inside, Carrie felt anything but peaceful. Bad dreams? Patrick murmured against her hair, and Carrie realized he'd been awake too, probably feeling her toss and turn throughout the night. Stupid dreams, Carrie admitted, surprising herself with the confession. I dreamed I showed up tonight and couldn't remember who I was. Like I reverted back to being that broken woman from 10 years ago. Patrick pulled back to look at her face, his dark eyes serious in the pale morning light. Carrie, if you don't want to do this, I do want to. Carrie cut him off, perhaps too quickly. I need to. I didn't expect to be nervous. Nervous about seeing him or nervous about how I'll react to seeing him? Patrick's voice carried an edge she rarely heard, and Carrie realized her husband wasn't as calm about tonight as he'd been pretending. Carrie studied Patrick's face, seeing something she'd never noticed before, not just protective love, but possessiveness. Real, primitive, masculine possessiveness that he usually kept carefully controlled. Patrick, she said softly, are you jealous? Terrified, Patrick corrected with brutal honesty. Not of him, of what seeing him might do to you, of whether some part of you still— He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Carrie felt a rush of something that surprised her, not irritation at his doubt, but tenderness for his vulnerability. Patrick Haskell, who commanded boardrooms full of generals and senators, who had built an empire from nothing, was afraid of losing her to a ghost from her past. Some part of me still what? Carrie pressed gently. Feels something for him. Patrick's jaw tightened. I know it's irrational. I know you love me. But Carrie, you were married to him for 5 years. That doesn't just disappear. Carrie kissed him softly, tasting mourning and worry and the kind of raw honesty that made her fall in love with him all over again. You're right, she said quietly. I will always feel something for Derek Carver. Patrick went very still beneath her. Gratitude, Carrie continued, watching relief flood his expression. I will always be grateful to him for being exactly the wrong man for me, so I could recognize the right one when he found me. Good morning, Carrie replied, turning to study Patrick's face in the pale morning light. Today's the day. Today's the day, Patrick agreed, his dark eyes serious but calm. How are you feeling? Carrie considered the question honestly. Peaceful, she said, surprising herself with the truth of it. I thought I'd be nervous or anxious, but I just feel ready to close this chapter completely. They lay quietly for a moment, listening to the sounds of their sons beginning to stir in the rooms down the hall. Edward's voice already chattering excitedly about something. Dolph's more measured responses creating a pattern of conversation that made Carrie smile. They're excited about tonight, Patrick observed. Edward's been planning his conversation topics for days. They've never seen me interact with someone from my past, Carrie said thoughtfully. For them, I've always been their successful, happy mother. Tonight they'll see proof that I wasn't always this person. No, Patrick corrected gently. Tonight they'll see proof that you've always been this person. You just needed the right circumstances to let your true self shine. At breakfast, the Haskell family gathered around their kitchen island like they did every weekend. The twins still in their pajamas, Carrie in one of Patrick's shirts, and Patrick himself making his famous blueberry pancakes, while the boys helped by arranging fruit in elaborate patterns. "Mama," Dolph said seriously, studying Carrie's face with the intensity he inherited from both parents, "you look different today." "Different how?" Carrie asked, genuinely curious about her 5-year-old's perception. "Like you're getting ready for something really important," Dolph replied. "Like when you have big meetings with presidents and stuff." Edward nodded sagely. "But also like when you help kids at the hospital feel better, like you're going to help someone tonight." Carrie exchanged a look with Patrick, amazed as always by their son's emotional intelligence. These boys had been raised to pay attention to feelings, to understand that emotions were valuable information, to trust their instincts about people and situations. "You're both very smart," Carrie said, pulling them close for a hug that smelled like syrup and little boy sweetness. "Tonight is important, but not because I'm nervous about it. It's important because it's the last piece of an old puzzle I need to finish before I can put it away forever." "Will you be sad?" Edward asked with the directness of a child who had never learned to hide his feelings. "No, sweetheart," Carrie said with absolute certainty. "I'll be grateful, because tonight I get to show the whole world how much I love your daddy and how proud I am to be your mama." That afternoon, while Patrick took the boys to their swimming lessons at the country club, Carrie spent time in her home office reviewing the speech she had prepared, not for the engagement party, but for her own peace of mind. She had written down everything she wanted to remember about who she was now, everything she needed to hold on to if seeing Derek triggered old insecurities. The list was both simple and profound. "You are Carrie Haskell, CEO of Haskell Farr International Consulting. You employ 127 people across 3 continents. You have advised governments, Fortune 500 companies, and international organizations. You are married to a man who sees you as a miracle. You are the mother of 2 sons who think you hung the moon. You have never been more beautiful, more successful, or more loved. You built all of this from nothing, with your own hands and mind. Derek Carver's opinion of you was wrong then, and is irrelevant now. Your worth has never been determined by someone else's ability to appreciate it." By late afternoon, the house had transformed into elegant chaos as the family prepared for the evening. Carrie's stylist arrived to perfect her hair and makeup, creating a look that was both timeless and contemporary, sophisticated enough for Washington's social elite, natural enough to highlight her genuine happiness. The emerald green Valentino dress fit like it had been designed specifically for Carrie's body, the silk catching light in ways that made her skin glow with health and contentment. Her jewelry was understated but perfect. The diamond earrings Patrick had given her, her wedding ring that caught light like captured starlight, and a delicate tennis bracelet that had been her anniversary gift. "Mama, you look like a princess," Edward declared when Carrie emerged from her dressing room, his 5-year-old voice filled with genuine awe. "You look like yourself," Dolph added with typical precision, "but like the fanciest version." Patrick appeared in the doorway wearing his perfectly tailored tuxedo, and Carrie's breath caught at how distinguished he looked. This was a man who commanded boardrooms full of generals and senators, but tonight he would be her partner, her support, her reminder that real love existed in the world. "You're absolutely stunning," Patrick said softly, crossing to take her hands. "Everyone in that ballroom is going to see exactly what Derek Carver lost when he was too stupid to appreciate perfection." The twins looked equally handsome in their miniature tuxedos, their dark hair perfectly styled, their faces bright with excitement about attending their first formal adult party. They understood this was a special occasion, and they had prepared accordingly, practicing their handshakes, reviewing proper party etiquette, and choosing interesting topics for conversation with adults. "Remember," Carrie told them as their driver loaded them into the Mercedes, "we're representing our family tonight. That means we're kind to everyone, polite even if people aren't polite to us, and we show everyone what real love looks like." "Got it, Mama," the twins chorused, settling into their booster seats with the seriousness of tiny diplomats embarking on an important mission. As their car wound through Washington's evening traffic toward the Willard Hotel, Carrie found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 10 years ago, she had been a broken woman signing divorce papers, believing herself to be worthless and unlovable. 5 years ago, she had been a struggling student working 3 jobs and dreaming of something better. Tonight, she was Carrie Haskell, successful entrepreneur, beloved wife, devoted mother, and living proof that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing that ever happens to you. "Patrick," Carrie said quietly as the Willard Hotel came into view, its elegant facade lit against the winter evening, "I need you to know something." "Anything," Patrick replied, taking her hand. 10 years ago, when Derek destroyed me, I thought my life was over. I thought I would never be happy again, never be loved again, never amount to anything. But sitting here tonight with you and our sons, knowing what we've built together, I can honestly say I'm grateful for every moment of pain that led me to you." Patrick brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with the reverence of a man worshipping something sacred. "Carrie, you are the most extraordinary thing that ever happened to me. Tonight, everyone in that ballroom is going to see what I see every day, a woman so magnificent that falling in love with her felt like winning the cosmic lottery." The boys listened to this exchange with the focused attention of children who understood they were witnessing something important, something that would help them understand what real love looked like when they were ready to find it themselves. As their car pulled up to the Willard Hotel's entrance, where photographers waited to capture Washington's elite arriving for Senator Pembroke's daughter's engagement party, Carrie felt a sense of completion settling over her. This wasn't about revenge or drama or proving anything to anyone. This was about truth. This was about showing up as exactly who she had become: successful, loved, happy, and completely at peace with the journey that had brought her to this moment of perfect contentment. "Ready?" Patrick asked as their driver opened the door. Carrie looked at her husband, her sons, and then at the elegant hotel where she was about to face her past as the woman she had become. "Ready," she said with quiet confidence. And as the Haskell family stepped out of their car and onto the red carpet, Carrie realized that she had never felt more beautiful, more powerful, or more grateful for the complicated path that had led her to this moment when she could finally, completely, close the door on everything that had come before Patrick and the boys. Tonight, Derek Carver would see exactly what he had lost. But more importantly, Carrie would see exactly what she had gained, and it was everything she had ever dreamed of, and more than she had ever dared to hope for. The storm was about to break, but Carrie Haskell was ready for whatever came next, because she was no longer the woman who could be broken by someone else's inability to see her worth. She was magnificent, and tonight, the whole world was going to know it. Chapter 10. When Queens Reclaim Their Crowns. The silence that fell over the Willard Hotel's grand ballroom when Carrie Haskell entered was so complete that even the string quartet stopped mid-note, and she knew that 10 years of rebuilding herself had led to this one perfect moment of reckoning. Carrie moved through the crowd of Washington's elite like a force of nature in emerald silk, flanked by Patrick in his impeccable tuxedo and their twin sons who looked like miniature princes. Every conversation ceased, every head turned, every person in that room suddenly understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. "My God," someone whispered, "is that really her?" "Carrie Haskell," another voice confirmed. "Look at that family. Look how happy they are." Derek Carver is about to have the worst night of his life. Carrie felt the weight of every stare, but instead of the anxiety she'd expected, she felt only calm certainty. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth, and truth had a way of illuminating everything it touched. "There he is," Dolph said quietly, his 5-year-old voice carrying the gravity of someone much older. "The man who hurt you, Mama." Carrie followed her son's gaze to where Derek stood near an ice sculpture, trapped in animated conversation with a group of investors. Even from across the room, she could see the desperation in his posture, the way he gestured too broadly, laughed too loudly. This was a man trying to sell something no one wanted to buy. "He looks smaller than I expected," Edward observed with startling accuracy. Patrick's hand found Carrie's back, steady and warm. "You ready for this?" Carrie straightened her shoulders, feeling the power that 6 years of unconditional love had given her. "I've been ready for 10 years. They approached like destiny itself, unstoppable, inevitable, perfect. Carrie watched the exact moment Derek became aware of her presence. His champagne glass paused halfway to his lips, his false smile froze, and something very much like terror flickered across his face. "Hello, Derek." Carrie's voice cut through the ballroom chatter like a blade through silk. Derek turned slowly, and she watched a decade of carefully constructed confidence crumble in real time. "Carrie." Her name came out strangled. "What are you doing here?" "Celebrating," Carrie replied with genuine warmth, then turned to the stunning young woman beside him. "You must be Vivienne. Congratulations on your engagement. You look radiant." Vivienne Carlyle was everything Carrie had once been, 28, beautiful, glowing with the certainty that she was loved. But there was intelligence in her eyes that suggested she saw more than most people realized. "Thank you," Vivienne said graciously. "I don't believe we've met." "Carrie Haskell," Carrie extended her hand. "This is my husband Patrick, and our sons Dolph and Edward. Derek and I were married once, a very long time ago." The temperature in their immediate vicinity seemed to drop 10 degrees. Carrie could feel the attention of nearby guests, could practically hear the mental cameras clicking as Washington's social elite realized they were witnessing the confrontation of the decade. "Married," Vivienne repeated slowly, her sharp gaze moving between Carrie and Derek. "He mentioned an ex-wife, but—" "But what?" Carrie asked gently. "But not someone like you." Vivienne's honesty was refreshing. Not someone so obviously successful, so clearly happy. Derek's face had gone ashen. "Vivienne, perhaps we should—" "Should what?" Vivienne's voice carried a new edge. "Should pretend this isn't fascinating. Carrie, your consulting firm is Haskell Farr International, isn't it? My father speaks very highly of your work." "Your father has excellent judgment," Carrie smiled. "And you have excellent instincts. I can see why Derek was drawn to you." "Yes," Dolph piped up with 5-year-old directness. "You seem much nicer than he is." The innocent brutality of it was perfect. Several nearby guests barely concealed their laughter, while Derek looked like he wanted to disappear into the marble floor. "Your children are beautiful," Vivienne said, her gaze lingering on the twins with something Carrie couldn't quite read. Twins must have been such a blessing. "The greatest blessing of our lives," Patrick said quietly, his hand moving to rest on Edward's shoulder. "We're incredibly grateful." "Twins," Derek echoed, the word coming out hollow and strange. Carrie felt the familiar tightness in her chest, not shame, but the ghost of old pain. "Yes, Derek. Twins. Identical boys, healthy and perfect in every way." "But you—" Derek stopped himself, glancing around at the rapt audience they'd attracted. "But I what?" Carrie's voice was deadly soft. Vivienne stepped closer, her instincts clearly screaming that something was very wrong. "Derek, what were you about to say?" The silence stretched taut as a wire. Carrie could feel Patrick's tension, could sense her son's confusion at the adult undercurrents they couldn't understand. "Nothing," Derek said quickly. "Just that I'm surprised. Happy for you, of course. Are you?" Carrie tilted her head, studying his face with the detached interest of a scientist examining a particularly disappointing specimen. "Are you really happy that the woman you called barren and worthless went on to have a beautiful family with a man who actually knew how to love her?" The words dropped into the ballroom like stones into still water, sending ripples of shock through every conversation within hearing distance. Vivienne went very still. "What did you just say?" "I said that your fiancé once told me I was barren and worthless," Carrie repeated calmly. "Among other things, he laughed when he served me divorce papers and said no one would ever love me because I couldn't perform the basic function of being a wife." The silence was deafening. Carrie could hear Vivienne's sharp intake of breath, could see the moment understanding dawned in her intelligent eyes. "Derek," Vivienne's voice was dangerously quiet. "Is this true?" "That was 10 years ago," Derek said desperately. "I was different then, younger. I said things in anger that I didn't mean." "Oh, you meant them," Carrie interrupted gently. "And I'm grateful you did, because they showed me exactly who you really are when things get difficult, when life doesn't go according to plan, when someone you claim to love needs support instead of cruelty." She turned to Vivienne with genuine compassion. "The question you need to ask yourself is this: what will he say about you when you inevitably disappoint him? And you will disappoint him, Vivienne, because that's what human beings do. We fail, we struggle, we have bad days and impossible circumstances. The man worth marrying is the one who loves you more in those moments, not less." Vivienne's hands were trembling now, and Carrie noticed she was twisting her engagement ring with unconscious anxiety. "I need some air," Vivienne said quietly, then looked directly at Derek. "Don't follow me. I need to think." She walked away without another word, leaving Derek standing alone among the wreckage of his carefully planned evening. "You've ruined everything," Derek said, his voice cracking with a decade of suppressed panic. "No," Carrie replied with infinite calm. "I saved her from making the same mistake I did. The mistake of believing that someone who tears you down when you're vulnerable actually loves you." She gathered her family around her, Patrick's steady strength, her son's innocent warmth, the life they'd built from ashes and determination. "Goodbye, Derek. I hope someday you learn the difference between love and possession. For both your sakes." As they walked toward the exit, Carrie felt the weight of every stare, every whispered conversation, every phone discreetly recording what would become Washington's most talked-about social confrontation in years. But none of it mattered compared to the feeling of Patrick's hand in hers, the sound of her son's laughter, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Near the coat check, Vivienne appeared one final time. "Mrs. Haskell," she said quietly. "Thank you. I thought I was in love, but watching you with your family, I realize I've never seen what real love actually looks like." Carrie smiled with genuine warmth. "You will, Vivienne. When you find someone worthy of you, you'll know the difference." As the Haskell family stepped out into the crisp February night, Carrie felt something shift inside her. Not triumph, not vindication, but completion. The scared, broken woman who had signed divorce papers 10 years ago was finally, completely gone. "How do you feel?" Patrick asked as they settled into their car. Carrie looked at her sleeping sons, then at her husband who had loved her back to wholeness, who had given her everything Derek had sworn she'd never have. "Like myself," she said simply. "Finally, completely like myself." And as they drove home through the quiet streets of Washington, Carrie realized that the best revenge wasn't destroying someone else's happiness. It was building something so beautiful, so obviously blessed, that their absence from it became their punishment. Derek Carver had been wrong about everything, but his wrongness had led her to everything right, and that was the most perfect ending she could have imagined.